Cart always, I've been cart always has problems, but I was just good to see it.
What kind of problem?
It's like,
Imagine a horror movie come to life. A 12-year-old boy found dead, starved, and beaten, weighing just 58 pounds. His father, gone. This isn't fiction. It's Jakari Robinson's real nightmare. We'll reveal the shocking truth behind this tragedy. Stay tuned to see how it unfolded. This is the case of Jakari Robinson, a 12-year-old from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, found dead in October 2023. His father, Romy Moy, was arrested after a 4-month manhunt, charged with reckless homicide and neglect. What you're about to hear is a descent into cruelty, a tale of a child betrayed by the one person who should have protected him. On October 10, 2023, Milwaukee police received a call that would unravel a nightmare. It was a dead-on-arrival report from a home on North Elmhurst Road, a place that should have been a sanctuary but instead became a tomb.
Yeah, I have this closet to do too. What?
All right.
Yeah. Just clearing out these closets to make sure there's no one in there.
Inside, they found Jakari Robinson, just 12 years old, his lifeless body sprawled across the living room floor. He was emaciated, his skin stretched tight over bones that jutted out like a skeleton's. Maggots crawled over him, a grotesque sign of how long he'd been left there. His arms and ribs were fractured, and a torn t-shirt covered his head like a makeshift shroud. The house itself was a cesspool mold, clung to the walls, feces stained the floors, and the air was thick with the stench of rot. Jakari's father, Romy Moy, was gone. He'd fled, leaving his son's body to decompose for nearly a week. It took 4 months for police to catch him, but when they did, the horrifying details began to spill out. Moy now faces charges of first-degree, reckless homicide, chronic neglect of a child, and failure to report a death. How did a father's neglect spiral into a community's nightmare? That's the question that haunts this case. Jakari Robinson wasn't just a victim, he was a child with dreams, a boy who should have been running through the streets of Milwaukee with his friends. At 12 years old, he lived with his father and 2 sisters, but his life was far from normal. Jakari loved food. It was one of the few joys he clung to in a world that seemed determined to take everything from him. But to his father, that love was a crime. Moy punished Jakari for stealing food, locking him away from the simplest human need. While his sisters could visit their mother, Jakari was isolated, unseen by her for 3 agonizing years. His older brother last saw him, alive, in August 2023, describing him as extremely skinny, a frail shadow of the boy he'd once been. Siblings later told police that Jakari was often grounded, trapped in the house, cut off from the family that might have saved him. This wasn't just a child denied basic needs. It was a boy deliberately stripped of his humanity, left to waste away in silence. Jakari's story cuts deep because it's so pure, so tragic a life. Extinguished before it could truly begin. Picture a grim scene, a filthy living room cluttered with trash and reeking of decay, a small body hidden under a blanket in the center of it all. That's how Jakari was found. That's how Jakari's older brother found him on October 10, 2023, dead on the floor, abandoned by the one person who should have cared.
Did you check in there?
There.
The home was a nightmare unto itself. Moldy food sat untouched in the refrigerator, a cruel irony for a boy who'd been starved. The floors were smeared with filth, and the air was heavy with the smell of death. Jakari's body told a story of unrelenting horror. At just 58 pounds, he was half the weight a boy his age should have been. His arms and ribs bore fractures, some old, some new, proof of repeated abuse that had gone unchecked. Maggots swarmed his face, and dried blood marked the floor near his feet. The autopsy painted an even bleaker picture. Jakari died from malnutrition and neglect, his body shutting down after months, maybe years of starvation. His father, Romy Moy, had withheld food as punishment for stealing, a twisted logic that drained the life from his son. And when Jakari finally slipped away, Moy stayed with the body for a week, whether out of shock, guilt, or cowardice, we may never know, before vanishing into the night, leaving his child to rot. The investigation was a race against a man who seemed to taunt the system. For 4 months, Romy Moy evaded capture, a ghost slipping through Milwaukee's shadows. While police hunted him, he was active on social media, posting cryptic messages about the case as if daring someone to find him. It was a bizarre twist that only deepened the suspense. Then, in February 2024, the manhunt ended. Moy was arrested in Milwaukee, dragged back to face the truth he'd tried to outrun. In the interrogation room, he admitted to beating Jakari with a shoe and withholding food as punishment. He claimed it was only 2 days without a meal, but Jakari's skeletal frame screamed of a far longer torment.
Always, I've been hard, always had problems. Well, I was just people see it.
What kind of problem?
It's like,
Detectives saw through the lies, and Moy's own social media posts had already betrayed him. While on the run, he'd written about the case, even responding to accusations with chilling words like, "It wasn't an accident." The net was tightening, and the truth was clawing its way out. See Moy falter in a stark interrogation room, muttering about a shoe as detectives close in. Inside that stark interrogation room, Romy Moy's facade began to crack. He sat slumped, his voice a low mumble as detectives pressed him. I just remember the shoe. He stammered when asked about the beatings. "A shoe doesn't break bones," a detective snapped back, the tension thick enough to choke on. Moy had no real defense. He insisted Jakari had only gone 2 days without food, but the boy's 58-pound body told a story of months of starvation. The detectives weren't fooled. They knew they were staring at a man who'd let his son waste away. In one gut-wrenching moment, they asked Moy what he'd say to Jakari if he could. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice hollow. It wasn't remorse, it was an admission, a confession stripped bare of any real feeling. Those raw words amplified the horror of Jakari's final days, a boy betrayed by the father who should have been his protector. Who was Romy Moy, the man behind this nightmare? After his fiancée died of an overdose, Moy took custody of Jakari and his 2 sisters, but instead of nurturing them, he turned on Jakari, labeling him a discipline problem and punishing him with starvation. Moy claimed Jakari's love for food was a behavioral issue, an excuse to justify his cruelty. He told others he had cancer, a story his own mother doubted, suspecting it was a ploy for sympathy. Red flags were everywhere. Jakari's siblings watched him shrink. His mother hadn't seen him in years, yet no one stepped in. While on the run, Moy's social media posts revealed a man unraveling.
That Jakari went without food was just 2 days. But in this interview, officers don't seem to buy that because the boy was so emaciated and he weighed only 58 pounds when he was found. So it had to have been much longer than that. Detectives were also not buying that Jakari was only beaten with a shoe like his dad claimed.
So he had some broken bones.
Moy's horrific
And we're just trying to understand exactly what
In a
happened.
packed
And the
courtroom,
broken
justice finally spoke. Romy Moy stood before the judge.
Yeah, I have this
His
closet to
guilt
do too.
undeniable. He pleaded guilty to reckless homicide, chronic neglect, and failure to report a death. The judge's words cut deep. This is the stuff of a horror movie. Moy was sentenced to 47.5 years in prison, a punishment that can't erase the pain he inflicted. For Milwaukee, it was a bittersweet victory. A severe sentence that shook the community to its core.
Just clearing out these closets to make sure there's no one in there.
To mourn a brother they couldn't save, and for a city grappling with a loss, the scars run far deeper than any courtroom can heal. Jakari's life was stolen, not just by his father, but by a world that failed to see him in time. Jakari Robinson's death left Milwaukee reeling, a wound that still festers in the hearts of his siblings and neighbors. How could a child be so isolated, so tortured, without anyone noticing? The system failed him. Jakari hadn't been to school in a year, and his mother's pleas went unheard. His story is a brutal lesson in what happens when we look away. If you suspect child abuse, don't hesitate, report it, speak up. It could save a life. As we close this chapter, let's not dwell only on how Jakari died, but on the life he deserved, a life of love, safety, and hope. In memory of Jakari Robinson, a boy who should still be with us today.